In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
When asked if Shadow of Mordor is canon during a Reddit AMA, developer Michael De Platter assured that, quote, "It takes place within the canon, and the backstory of Sauron and Celebrimbor is drawn directly from canon," end quote. That is simply not true. I'm not calling him a liar. But their game contradicts and strays from Tolkien's lore in numerous ways, some minor, but some pretty major. If you are interested in learning more about these errors and deviations, then please allow me to explain further.
I'll have your guts!
The game begins with servants of Sauron launching an attack to retake the Black Gate, which has been controlled by the Kingdom of Gondor since Sauron's defeat in the Second Age. Talion is captain over the rangers tasked with guarding the gate and watching for any sign of the Dark Lord's return. During the attack, Talion and his family are executed by the Black Hand, who serves as Sauron's second-in-command. Upon death, a blood ritual of sorts is performed on Talion, which binds his body with the spirit of an ancient wraith named Celebrimbor. The two meet once Talion awakens in the Shadow Realm, but Celebrimbor has no memory of his past life or even who he is. Together they conspire to bring down the Black Hand, which they presume will put an end to their curse.
You are banished from death, cast adrift between the worlds of light and dark. Curse binds us together within the walls of Ardar.
If what you say is true, then how do we break this curse?
We find the one who cast it on us, the Black Hand of Sauron.
That's a general summary of the game's plot, but now let's stop to pick some of it apart. The Shadow of Mordor is set somewhere during the 60 years between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which means, according to the appendices, the orcs had already retaken the Black Gate over 1,000 years prior to when the game takes place. That isn't the only inconsistency regarding the timeline. Early on in the game, we meet Gollum, slinking his way across Mordor.
We will prove ourselves, bright master. We will prove we are friends.
Now we know from the appendices that Gollum first entered Mordor in year 2980 of the Third Age. We also know that Sauron declared himself openly in Mordor and began rebuilding in 2951, which I'm assuming is what we saw in the game, which means Gollum shouldn't be in Mordor for another 29 years. The timeline and sequence of events were definitely compressed quite a bit for the game's story.
Mordor hurts us!
In the Second Age, Sauron, under the guise of the friendly Annatar, enters into Middle-earth. The Dark Lord in disguise befriends the inhabitants of Eregion, chiefly the smiths of Ostinethel, and instructs them in the art of ring-making. It was at this time that the Lesser Rings of Power were forged by the Elven Smiths led by Celebrimbor. During a flashback in Shadow of Mordor, we see both Annatar and Celebrimbor working together to forge Lesser Rings of Power, but the three Elvish Rings of Power are the only that the books specifically state were made by Celebrimbor, and we know that Sauron had no part in their creation. Once Sauron's true intentions were revealed upon the forging of the One Ring, the three Elvish Rings were hidden away to be kept safe from the Dark Lord. War was waged across Middle-earth for these rings, with Eregion laid to waste and Celebrimbor taken prisoner. Through various forms of torment and torture, Sauron learned the location of the Lesser Rings of Power from Celebrimbor, But he would not give up the three, and so was put to death. His corpse was impaled with arrows, hung upon a pole, and carried into battle as a banner by the orcs. Here ends Celebrimbor's role in the Legendarium. But in Shadow of Mordor, things happen a little bit differently.
Take them to Mordor.
After the assault against Eregion, Celebrimbor is taken back to Mordor to assist Sauron in the completion of the Ring of Power. This revelation makes no sense at all. In the First Age, and before recorded history, Sauron was known as Myrlon, and was a servant of the Vala Aule. Aule was a mighty smith and craftsman, and under his tutelage Sauron's knowledge and power grew vastly, all of which was put to use later in creating the One Ring. To suggest that Sauron would need the assistance of an elf in the forging of the ring is absurd. Now, I can't find where this is said in the game, but many people online claim that Celebrimbor was needed in masking the ring's power, which I guess would be believable if this were before he revealed himself. I mean, at this point, Sauron had already attacked Eregion, and everyone knew he was evil. Why is Sauron trying to hide his intentions now? After its completion, Celebrimbor stole the ring, and for a brief time attempted to use it against Sauron. Needless to say, it did not work out. I should also mention that according to the game, Celebrimbor is responsible for giving the ring a will of its own, which adds nothing to the lore or story, and he's given no reason for doing this. Celebrimbor's role in history is very much embellished and alters quite a bit from canon. Now, we never really get to know him personally too much in the books, but we do know that he is noble and pure of heart. His video game counterpart is a much more cold, vengeful, and power-hungry take on the character.
Thief! It was mine to keep.
Which actually does make sense, given his relationship with the ring and the effect it's bound to have had on him. Throughout the game, you have access to Talion's fighting capabilities and weaponry as a ranger, as well as Celebrimbor's abilities as a wraith, which are completely made up for the game. Wraiths can't mind control people, nor can they possess people, nor can they possess dead people, which somehow brings them back to life or something. I would also like to point out that Tolkien has stated that besides Beren, men do not come back from the dead. Beren's return was a very unique exception ordained by Elu, the god of the mythos. The Celebrimbor's state as a wraith is a complicated situation to explain. The Ring Wraiths were men who fell under Sauron's control after accepting Rings of Power from the Dark Lord. The Celebrimbor is certainly not a Ring Wraith in that sense, as he is not under Sauron's control and not in possession of a ring. And of all the people to have worn the One Ring, Bilbo, Frodo, Gollum, Isildur, none of them ever turned into a Wraith as a result. And if Sauron cursed Celebrimbor, somehow turning him into a wraith, then well, he's an idiot, because he literally turned a captive, hopeless elf into an unstoppable killing machine who himself cannot be killed and can also control the minds of orcs. Another theory is that perhaps he's bound to the ring as well as Mordor due to his contribution to the ring's creation, which out of all of the theories is the most plausible, though certainly not concrete. Before we wrap up, I'd like to quickly touch upon a few errors that I don't have too much to say about, but still thought I should mention. I don't have time to dissect the ending, that would require a video all on its own, but to make a long story short, Sauron's goal and the reason for the blood ritual is that he needs to reunite with Celebrimbor in order to take a physical form. A common misconception is that Sauron doesn't have a body in the Lord of the Rings, which actually isn't true. He does, but never leaves his tower.
This dwarf is far from home.
Not all those who wander are lost.
At one point in the game, Celebrimbor quotes the passage, "Not all those who wander are lost," from a poem that hasn't been written yet. Also, the poem was written by Bilbo Baggins. How would he have even heard of it? It's just poorly thought out fan service. After Celebrimbor steals the ring and turns invisible, Sauron looks around in confusion, wondering where he went. But the reason why the ring makes the wearer invisible is so that Sauron can see you in the Shadow Realm. This was demonstrated quite clearly when Frodo put on the ring in Bree and Mordor. At the Prancing Pony, the Nazgul immediately knew where he was, and in Mount Doom, Sauron panicked, seeing that the ring was so close to where it could be unmade. Also, one more thing that I should mention is that dwarves, they don't shave. This is pretty obvious. I don't know how they messed that up, but yeah. Lastly, I would like to talk about the violence in the game. Tolkien was not a fan of unnecessary gore, and has stated that he didn't want any adaptations of his stories to focus too heavily on the violence. Now, those of you who are familiar with Children of Húrin would know that Tolkien was not opposed to darker and more mature themes, but only to serve a greater purpose than just violence for the sake of entertainment. I don't think Tolkien would have appreciated the way violence is portrayed in Shadow of Mordor. I hope this video was informative for those of you wanting to know more about the subject matter. I know some of the things I mentioned may appear nitpicky, but I felt I should mention everything I found that clashes with the canon. And these errors certainly don't ruin the game, but when you alter a beloved series like Tolkien's, it is important to document and make others aware of said changes, especially when it's falsely marketed as adhering to the canon.
To the city.